Now, when we think about the progress of the Christian faith, there are always advances and recessions. It's too long a history for it to be otherwise. And one of the most famous exponents of this was the great historian of mission, Kenneth Scott Latourette, who was the Sterling Professor of Missions and Oriental History at Yale University, and his massive, multi-volume history of the expansion of Christianity was very influential. And he characterizes the growth history of Christianity in terms of up, down, up, down, up, down a little, and then up and up and up and away. And that's shorthand for quite a lot of data, but you'll see a diagram on that. Essentially, according to Latourette, you get 3 advances and 3 recessions. And each recession is significantly due to persecution. So in Latourette's scheme, the years 33 to 500 see a time of expansion. Christianity grows to become the unchallenged religion of the Middle East, and that even extends to Europe. Then from 500 to 950, we get the first Great Recession, according to Latourette. And this is due mainly to the rise of Islam, and the church in the Middle East and Africa becomes a minority. And we know that's to do with persecution, as we will see. Then he tells of a second advance running from 950 to 1350, and that's when Christianity becomes the main religion in Europe. That's followed by another Great Recession from 1350 to 1500. This is when the Mongols sweep across Asia, and we'll talk about that in our third great global persecution. And the Mongols, of course, become Muslim, and through shocking violence, perpetuated by the likes of, say, Tamerlane, they wipe out Christianity very significantly in Asia. Then he talks about a third advance period, 1500 to 1750, and that's when the great European civilizations, such as Spain and Portugal, and then a little later the Netherlands and Great Britain, all maritime powers that through their navies were able to break the Islamic land blockade, they sailed to America, North and South, Africa, and the Far East. And those Catholic states of Spain and Portugal were not bashful in imposing Christianity on conquered populations. Then that's followed by the Third Great Recession, 1750 to 1815. And that, for Latourette, is due to what's called the European Enlightenment. And you could also argue that persecution is central to this, because Enlightenment principles are an important response to the wars of religion which convulsed the continent. Christian state, either Catholic or Protestant, persecuted Christians from the minority churches. And so there was the conclusion, and even Christian leaders like John Locke were important here, that religion could no longer be trusted to cohere societies, and states had to become secular and base their governing principles on reason, not revelation. Now, for Latourette, that's a smaller recession, but a recession all the same, because people lost their faith in religion. So then, the last period that he specified from 1815 to 1950 was one of great advance. And this was due to the great Protestant missionary expansion across the globe. From 1950s onward, of course, Latourette didn't track this because he retired in 1953, but he would have recorded another great advance, perhaps the most remarkable of all. Donald McGavran, who was to be a very famous figure as a professor of church growth, he wrote an article in the 1950s, when in India, predicting that the Christian population of Africa would rise to 300 million by the year 2000. And this was at a time when the Christian population of Africa was barely 40 million. Well, no one published his article. They all thought he was crazy. In fact, McGavran was off by 100 million. 100 million short of the Christian population of Africa, which became 400 million by the year 2000. According to the Pew Global Religious Futures Project, Christianity is a third of the world's population, meaning 2 in every 6 people are Christians. And this, they project, will remain the proportion up to 2050, because the Christian population of Africa will double. Mind you, it may be difficult to call this an advance because it's holding steady. The Muslim population, through its demography, is the one that's most rapidly advancing now in global terms, and it will double, probably, to join Christianity as a third of the world population by 2050. You will see that we will get you into a little book by Philip Jenkins. It's called The Lost History of Christianity. But the purpose of going into this is to construct what he calls there a theology of extinction. The church has expended a lot of energy producing theologies of church growth, but not nearly as much energy producing theologies of extinction. How do churches die? And we have to ask the question, because persecution can kill the church or trip it up. And we have to look at 20 centuries of Christianity to see the patterns. And we have to do better than just generalize from our own experiences, which perhaps in recent years have been of growth. To do the work of scholarship, we must do more than generalize from our own experience. So, the historical story will expose us to a much vaster pool of evidence from which to base stronger conclusions. We need to know, ultimately in a practical sense though, what a dangerous foe the persecutor or persecutors is to the church. So with all that said, let's take our journey through the 5 great global persecutions of the church.